Hello and welcome to the romance track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z, and tonight we are talking about witch and warlock romance, all that wonderful magic that goes along with the magic of love. But before we launch into that, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Ari.
I'm Ari McKay, and with my writing partner, we publish contemporary romance, historical, and action adventure as Ari McKay, and as Rachel Angela, we publish paranormal, Southern Gothic, and fantasy romance.
Okay, Liv.
Hello, I'm Liv. I write paranormal and historical romance, and I'm really happy to be here.
Okay, Cameron.
Hi, I'm Cameron Allie. I write steamy contemporary romance, and I also write urban fantasy and some paranormal romance.
And Tawdra.
Hi, I'm Tawdra Kandle, and under my pen name, Tawdra Kandle, very close to my real name, I write paranormal romance. I write contemporary steamy under my real name.
Okay, and I'm Gail Z and Morgan Brice. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy, lots of magic and witches and wizards and all of that. And as Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance, which is who I'll be tonight. So what got you fascinated with the idea of weaving witches and warlocks and magic into your romance? Ari?
Well, I've been reading witches and warlocks and romance all of my life, and so I, couldn't resist the opportunity. In fact, I mean, we started out, the very first books that we published were urban fantasy, and even then we had some magic interwoven with that, and we didn't go into the pure paranormal until a couple of books later. But it's just, there's so many possibilities when you add in the magic. It makes things just so much more than what you can accomplish in contemporary. It makes situations different. It makes how they respond to love, how they fall in love. I mean, things like, fated mates and stuff. So that's why magic was a huge draw for Rachel and I.
Okay, Liv.
So I think the thing that appeals to me about writing witch characters is that they're more or less like me, or like people that I know. I don't know many vampires, or
many, but not, you said many, but not
many.
none.
I know
So
many.
do that.
One or two, yeah.
One or two.
And werewolves, don't know many werewolves either, but I know if I applied myself, I could learn the basic principles of witchcraft, and it just seems more accessible to me. So I like sort of writing, I prefer my fiction to have as little to do with the real world as possible, because the real world kind of sucks. So yeah, it's that combination.
Okay. Cameron.
I think I've always kind of been drawn to it. When I was a teenager, I definitely read fantasy romance, or fantasies type stories that featured witches. I remember being a teenager and getting like Wicca books out of the library and stuff like that. So I think it's always been kind of there. And then after I started into contemporary, when I got the idea for the fantasy one, it snowballed, and it was just so much easier to write. You're not tied down necessarily to this world, and just makes it more fun.
Nice. Tawdra.
Well, I never really set out I didn't say, oh, I want to write a book about witches, or that includes witches. This story just lent itself to that, to a young woman who was discovering more about herself, and in that discovering that the powers she'd always had were just one element of a wider subset of powers that she had. So, you know, when I say I didn't plan to, I really didn't think about it. But when I look back, I think the first show I really remember being hooked on as a kid was Bewitched. And I love Tabitha, and I love this whole idea of having these powers. So maybe it was all there in my subconscious. But I like writing about witches, specifically witches, not, you know, warlocks, although I have had some of those as well. But because I think it's a good indication of strong women, and I like to write really strong women. So it's another aspect of feminine strength.
Okay. Well, my favorite TV show as a preschooler was Dark Shadows. So I know that that set me on a path from which, you know, I've never really veered. And I think that that always piqued my interest in not only vampires and werewolves, but also witches, because that's a very big part of that plot line. And I remember as a elementary school kid getting in trouble when my parochial school took us all to the public library, and the book I wanted to check out was called A Cavalcade of Witches. And that got me a stern talking to. I went back later and got it anyhow. But so, you know, I've just always, yes, I grew up watching Bewitched. I always wanted to be able to twitch my nose and have all the housework done. I'm still waiting. You know, I think that would be an awesome use of magic. Just, you know, little dishes done. I'm there for it. So it's a lot of fun to write characters who are, some of whom are proficient in magic and some of whom are just figuring this out with some spectacular wrong turns, but figuring out how this works and kind of getting the hang of it while trying not to like get killed or something. Which brings me to the question of how do you build your magical system? What research do you draw on? What influences and how do you set the rules for how your magic works? Ari?
Well, I am think I've been playing D&D for 43 years, something like that. So of course, one of the primary things is you have to have balance. So, and I think that's one thing that I always hated about the lately problematic universe that we don't mention anymore, where you could have spells where, okay, anybody can do this spell who can, you know, shout the words and it'll kill somebody and there's no repercussions or anything. So all of our magical systems in any of our magical universes draw heavily on a D&D style of balance, where, you know, you takes a certain amount of energy. If you want to do this really, really big spell, it's going to drain you. If you want to do a smaller spell, you can do a lot more of them. You know, it's easier. And you have to be, you know, older to learn some really powerful things. So yeah, D&D definitely. In fact, I see that. I love it when I'm reading other authors' work and I'm like, ah, yeah, they played D&D. I get it. I see it. So yeah, that's where we come from.
Yeah, we can spot each other. We know. Liv?
I never played D&D. That must have been my first mistake.
It's not too late.
This is true. So I guess I would say it depends. I sort of let the story tell me what it needs, which sounds really kind of airy-fairy, like not grounded in any kind of reality. But honestly, the series that I co-write with Irene, The Hours of the Night, has witch characters. She sort of introduced them, and it's possible she was, I mean, this is vampires in New Orleans, right? So it's possible she was influenced by the Mayfair witches from Anne Rice. But in my The Lighthouse Keeper, my more or less recent release, most of the characters are practicing witches, and beyond just having a very limited, like each of them has a different gift. That's kind of the only limit I put on them. And then it's just sort of seeing how that all plays out.
Very good. Cameron?
Mine just kind of like it continues to build. It's been a while since I've read back through it, and I got to get into the next one. In mine, it takes place in a different realm. So the witches there's two different types of them. I've got green-skinned witches, which are the more powerful ones, and then everyone else is not quite as powerful. I did if they're doing a powerful spell that's not their specialty of magic, it generally drains them. And if it's not something that they're proficient in, that's when I'll have them pull out a wand. I try to do some research into different things. In the first book, one of the main witch was making a tea to help the hero sleep. And so, I researched what we put into that to actually help him out with that. So there's some research that's based on things here, and then some stuff that I've just entirely made up. Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Tawdra?
Mine is very much set in the real world, and I think the basis is that everybody has powers of to some degree. It's just a matter of discovering what yours are, and then using that as a pathway into how you fit into the larger world. There is an institute called the Carruthers Institute, which works with people who are just discovering that they have these powers and how to use them best to supposedly to help them, but it's really, there's an ulterior motive there. But they tend to be very nature-based too. When Tasman is just beginning to know what she can do, she's very much getting in touch with nature and how she can work with the elements. And it's also very historically based, because we have, reference that this power goes back to Eastern Europe and was brought over here through a family there. So history, nature. Yep.
I'm a research geek, and I have loved anything spooky since I could read. So I try to make sure that the magic that I reference at least has some basis in real world practitioners' craft. I certainly don't want to give offense to anybody who believes and who practices. And the lore here is very, very old, so there's a lot to draw on. And what can I say? I've got grimoires on my Kindle. So I like to try to draw from the legends and the lore and the traditions that already exist, and be as faithful to that as I can, with some authorial license, depending on, what the situation is in the book. But that cumulative knowledge built up over, in many cases, centuries or longer, is better than anything you can make up. So why not tap into that, be authentic, and also get an amazing number of ideas? It's just kind of a fantastic connection there. And we have Olivia joining us. So I want you to think about the next question. We'll let Olivia introduce herself and then get in on the next round of questions. But what's the most fun or easiest part about writing witches and warlocks, and what's the most difficult part as you weave this into a story? And welcome, Olivia. We just can't see you.
Oh. There.
Welcome.
Sorry.
Tell us what you write, and then we'll catch you on this next round of questions.
I write a little bit of everything, but I do have some paranormal romance and some urban fantasy. And then I do some contemporary romance and some mystery too. So.
Okay. So the question is, what's the easiest and what's the hardest part about writing witches and warlocks? Ari?
Oh, that's a tough question because it really depends on the character. I think that the hardest part is making a basis for what their powers are and then staying true to it and not letting yourself kind of just go crazy with, well, we're just going to let them be, infinitely powerful. And, so keeping, finding magical things that fit within the characterization that you're trying to achieve for a specific person, and making sure that you don't, step beyond those bounds. At least that's what I find hard. The easiest part is that it does give you a much bigger playground than, I mean, and I write contemporary all the time as well, but when, like, for instance, when I was writing Gods and Monsters, which is actually the latest Rachel Angela book, and one of our main characters is a god, only he is very, very careful to say, I'm just a really powerful magic user, that you don't have, a frame of reference for the amount of power that I have. And what was really cool about writing Arante and his powers were that there, could literally do anything with them and it would fit within his characterization. But there was just so much to pick from, and that, I think that was the easiest part of you. And it goes back to what you said, Gail, about there's so much history there that drawing from it gives you so much inspiration. And that's exactly what we did with the Carnival of Mysteries. Was every single act in there was taken from existing sort of mythos. So that was the easy part. You didn't have to make it up, it already was there.
Okay. Olivia. You're muted. There you go. You're still muted.
Okay, there we go. So the hardest part, like she said, is probably the world building and keeping everything in order. When I first wrote both of my series, my magical series, I didn't do a series Bible up front. I didn't keep track of that world. And so that's probably the hardest thing, is to keep track of. And I have two series that are very different. The magical creatures have different manifestations of their power. So keeping all of that straight. The easiest thing is just that you can virtually do what you want. It's your world. You can make all the rules and decide how it's gonna play out. So that's the easiest part.
Okay, how about you, Liv?
I'm going to cop out and say it's really, to me, the easy parts and the hard parts are almost the same, whether you're writing contemporary or paranormal or historical. It's finding, and maybe this is just my sort of personal thing, is when Irene reads my stuff, she's always like, you need more emo. So for me, getting into the character and capturing the emotion of the moment, that's the hard part. I don't care if they just shifted out of werewolf form or zapped somebody with their magic wand or whatever. It's finding the person in all of the crazy or all of the magic. And at the same time, it's the fun part too, because you can be like, yeah, we'll have to do this. So
Cameron?
I think for me the hardest is the same type of thing, where it's the series Bible. I've written one novel and two short stories in the fantasy world I've got going, and I didn't make a Bible, so now I've got to go back when I go to start number 2, the next full novel. I have to go through and write down everything, where everything was, and what everybody's powers are, and all that sort of stuff. But I think the best part about it is just that it's fun. Because it's fun to enjoy those characters and what they can do. And for me in the first book, the the best part was writing her familiar. His name is Lucifer, and he's a black cat, and he can talk. And he stole the show of the book. He just became everyone's favorite character, and he was a blast to write. So it's just that fun aspect.
And Tawdra.
So in the third book of this series, the main character at this point has been she's a young girl, and she has been forced to hide and kind of subvert her powers all this time, her whole life. And she's finally in a position where she is learning about what she can do, and she feels freer. She's in a situation where she's being taught, and and she's also kind of having her wild phase that, I'm sure we all went through in high school. And so it's a love scene, and she's really feeling free for the first time to kind of let loose. And that was one of my favorite scenes to write, and to just kind of let her do whatever she wanted to do and just feel this kind of abandon that she finally could feel, and while at the same time still being in control of her powers. So those are always my favorite, when they can just have fun with it. The hardest ones have been some of the more serious, where there's some very, somber, sober topics, and death, and people using their power not in good ways. And those are always that they take a lot out of me. And those are the hardest ones. They're also the most rewarding to write, but they are hard.
I think that, as I believe Ari mentioned, it's the figuring out the cost of magic so that it doesn't just become this limitless superpower, and figuring out the vulnerabilities, because if you're so powerful that nothing can really hurt you, then there's no danger, there are no stakes. And if you can just keep cranking out the magic as long as you need it, it gets boring. Again, you're not really ever in any danger. So I like figuring that piece out of, when do you run out of juice? Always at the worst moment. What can drain your power? How long can you keep it going? And figuring those things out, as well as I have some highly powered characters, but I also have some who only have little magic. So what can you do, pardon me, if you only have little magic that can make a big difference? You don't have to have this massive amount of power. Maybe you can just throw rocks really good, and that can come in handy. So that's sort of fun, as well as, I've got some characters who are proficient in voodoo and root work, and trying to weave them into the story, being faithful to those traditions and respectful of those traditions. So getting it right, but also working them into the fiction. So that's a lot of fun. So this is a romance panel. How does the magic work? How's all this witchy woo-woo go with falling in love? Ari?
So there's a lot of routes that it can take. Fated mates is a great big huge trope in magical universes, and I've written stuff where witches and warlocks can get fated mates just as well as any kind of shifter can. But I've also, in Asheville Arcana, we don't have that. Witches and warlocks don't have fated mates. But so what happens if a shifter, their fated mate is a witch or warlock, and that's not the same bond on the side of the other person? And we touch on that in two of the Asheville Arcana books actually have that, where it's a mage with a creature who is fated to be the mate, but the mage doesn't have that same kind of connection. So that was kind of interesting to do. When it gets to the spicier stuff, it's always fun to throw magic in there. You don't have to go through, you have to strip off the clothes and do all of these things. I guess, like, bing, it's gone, right? So that can be a lot of fun too. Or using magic in different ways in the spicy. I mean, can't get too much into that, of course, because of the venue that we're putting this on. But yeah, that can be a lot of fun and very interesting, and it opens up all kinds of different possibilities.
Okay. All right, Olivia.
Well, probably the romance that came to me in my books is midway in my series, and the characters, everyone thinks she's a witch, but she's really not. And what happens is she's unconscious, and we find out that she's really married to one of the other characters, and no one knows this. This is a big secret. And the way to save her is, it turns out that she's actually a succubus. And so her husband has to make love to her to revive her from this unconscious state that she's in. And that is probably my favorite romance scene I've ever written, because Nikki and Jerry, that scene of them, all of the secrets just coming out in the open in just a very beautiful way. That's probably my favorite romance I ever wrote in my paranormal series.
Okay.
And I see Tawdra nodding her head.
How about you, Liv?
Goodness, I'm sounding like a broken record. It's about finding the human inside the magic. And so it gives, I find, it can give lovers something they have in common, something they share, something they can both relate to and understand. It can be the opposite. It can be this strange thing that one of them can do, that the other is sort of either learning about or confused by, or so. Yeah, it's just trying to figure out, with any spicy scene, it's the important thing is not the spice necessarily, but it's how it moves the plot forward and how it moves the character forward. So that's kind of what drives it, I think.
Okay, Cameron.
In the first book in my Clay Ridge series, the love scenes and the romance is definitely quite linked to the magic aspect of it. For that one, it's a witch, and she's supposed to come from a very powerful family, but for some reason she hasn't been able to unlock her mage magic, despite everything she's tried over the last 125 years. And then when this mortal comes through the portal, she falls for him, and as things develop, like the first time they go to kiss, she gets a spark of mage magic, and it's tied into their relationship. She finally starts to be able to levitate and all that sort of stuff. It starts to come in as their emotional connection deepens. And as it was mentioned earlier, the fated mates thing. So they're very much fated mates. When she was in her 30s, I think, early like 20s, 30s, she was at Witch Academy. And while she was there, she fell in love with a werewolf, and he, they had a relationship, and the mage magic was starting to spark a bit then, but things fell apart for them, and he comes back in this book, and he's trying to destroy things, and it changes how I kind of lost where I was going with that, but yeah, so the fated mates aspect really comes back into this, and that first guy just doesn't want to give up, but he's got to accept defeat at some point.
Okay, Tawdra.
Well, at the risk of sounding super corny, in the books, at the end of the day, the love between the characters is the real magic. I have several characters who are who are two gifted people who are together, and that's always fun to write a scene. There is one two of my favorite books are about the two people who are villains of other books, or at least a villain and a sort of villain, and how they get together and how they save each other through not only their magic but through their love, and they really become this kind of power couple in the world. But the first couple who I wrote, she has powers, she has gifts, and he does not. Nothing. And just how that works, and how because she can hear thoughts, so he's very, imagine if you could hear the thought of all the thoughts going through the head of your lover. It might not be everything, it might be very helpful, it also might not be. So that was very interesting to write that. And then in my world, it all culminates in this book called Age of Aquarius, which is where they're saving the world from very dark magic. And the romances and the love stories are ultimately what get them through. All the different characters converge to save the world. And that was a lot of fun to write, as they're preparing to go into this epic battle, and how each couple deals with it, and saying goodbye or getting ready to go together. And that was very gratifying for me, and one of my favorite parts. So
in a couple of my series, one person has magic and the other person at the beginning doesn't believe in magic. And so it's fun getting them together and overcoming that skepticism. And, usually that happens right at the point somebody's almost about to die, because of course it does. But having those characters, and I tend to write established couples, having them grow into that, learning to appreciate each other's talents and abilities, getting over those reservations. And in some cases, the character has reservations about their own power because they've been told that it's bad or that it's wrong or that they shouldn't. And so having them come to accept it and learn and grow and be able to control that power. And a lot of times that comes into just being able to use their words and communicate. Aside from all the magic and the woo-woo, is to just be able to talk it out and actually say what they mean. And so it's fun using the magic as another form of communication to be able to see the characters grow, and not only grow individually, but grow together and have that trust, even if they aren't equally powerful. Now, do you have any kind of cool spin you've put on magic, or something really neat that happens in your world that just is a fun side piece of the magical system that you've created, Ari?
Oh gosh. I mean, there's in all of our stories, there tend to be, little inside jokes that we put in. Oh gosh, that one. I mean, there's always nods, like Gods and Monsters is actually a whole bunch of nods to not only other authors' books, but to other things. Anybody who's ever heard of the Galliers can probably guess where we came up with our circus acrobats, from Cat People. That is a very, very old movie from back in the very early 80s. So I mean, that's always kind of fun to be able to take, little side pieces of history or of popular culture, I guess it was what it would be for us. And we do put nods to like some of our other books, like characters will show up that they'll have different names, but they're really the same characters from other books, just in like little side parts. So it's probably more in jokes. I don't know that anybody else would get it, but I have a lot of fun doing that and putting in just things that amuse myself. and so I think that's probably all of it though.
Okay, Olivia?
Gosh, I don't really know. The thing that came to mind is I have a series that's a lot lighter. It's the Lindley Leakin series, and it's kind of it's definitely fun and cute and quirky. But we go several books into the series, and we have several characters that are their issue in their life is established. And then midway in the series, my main character, Lindley, casts a spell. And then it's the ultimate, you always think, oh, well, if I had done this, or if this had happened, then life would be so much better. So all of those things that all of these characters we had established what their issue is, all of those things get resolved or get changed all of a sudden. And so the entire direction of every character story changes midway through the series. And that was really fun. It was that ultimate, oh, if only this had happened, life would be great. Well, it's not great. Everything gets turned upside down, even though you got what you think you wanted, just because she accidentally cast a spell. So that was probably my funnest thing I did with magic in my series.
You're muted.
Oh, how about you, Liv? Sorry.
That's what I figured you said, but I just wanted to be sure. To me, probably the most fun I had writing a character with magic is Vincent from The Lighthouse Keeper, because he is from a very well-to-do family, and but this is Victorian era, late Victorian era, and his family's from the Midwest, and robber baron type wealthy, but nice people don't have magic. So when he starts to exhibit this trait, he basically gets pruned from the family tree and ends up in San Francisco, where he's working for the Witches Council because they like his last name and the prestige that associated with it. So his whole thing is that his magic is just a parlor trick. Like, he can take something, any object, and turn it into any other object. And my intention starting out was that this was a very minor magic that he possessed. And over the course of the story, I found more and more ways of using that. What seemed like it was going to be just a trick or something, he ends up not saving the day, but certainly saving himself, because as the story goes on, he finds more and more sort of elaborate ways of turning one thing into another and making it useful. So that was fun for me to watch. Like, I was standing on the outside just watching all of this go on. Yeah.
Cameron?
In Clay Ridge, we've got tons of different unique things. I tried to put my own spin on like everything that I've brought in. So one of the best things coming in were the familiars. So all the familiars can talk. They don't have to be cats. They have 9 lives, and they can feel whatever the witch is experiencing, whether it's emotional pain or physical pain. And if the witch dies, something happens to the witch, then the familiar will die as well. So that was definitely something fun, and so far all the familiars we've come across have been pretty snarky, and they think they know it better than everybody else. So they've been really fun to write. I've also got there's just tons and tons of different types of creatures in Clay Ridge. One of them is vampires. And the way I've written my vampires is that they can't drink blood from other immortal creatures or it will kill them. So they have to drink from something that has like an average lifespan, like a mortal, or an animal that's not a familiar. And so at the very end of the novel, first book, I gave a snippet from the next book, which I'm still working on, where we've discovered that, or one vampire in particular has discovered that if he drinks half witch blood, so if somebody's half witch, half mortal, if he drinks their blood, he gets mage power. And so that's going to kind of lead into all the conflict in the second one. So that's going to be a lot of fun to deal with. Yeah.
Very good. Tawdra?
Well, the vampire reminded me that probably one of the more unique things in my world that's not strictly speaking witch related, but is related, is that I was getting ready to write this spin-off series all in the same world, and I thought I just had a thought of, why are the vampires always like 17, 18, 19, immortally, right? Eternally teenagers, late teenagers, or early 20s or something. But what if a mid-40s college professor got turned into a vampire? Like, what would that look like? And so that's what I did. And you know, it was all part of this whole plan to save the world. He was very specifically turned. And he was already set to move into an over 50 community in Florida. And that's what he did. And his next door neighbor, you know, had no idea why he was in the dark all the time and why he, you know, all these different things. So that was a lot of fun to kind of turn on its head. But I think probably one of the more unique spins is that because we had all these different creatures with different powers, and when they needed to save the world, they needed to go back in time, so they were able to use their powers in all different ways to travel backwards. Have a group of them travel back to the Summer of Love, 1967, where they had to change something that happened that summer in order to save the world in the present. And as they're trying to get a ride to where they have to be, who gives them a ride but Janis Joplin and her band, who are on their way to play a gig. So that was a lot of fun. And I actually was able to do research and go back and say, what was she playing? Like, where was she playing on this particular day? And it just happened to work out. So that was
Nice.
that was a lot of fun.
I have fun writing people with a variety of different types of magic, everything from weaver magic to being a touch magic to necromancy. But I think probably one of the more unique spins I put on things is in my Fox Hollow series with my shifters. They always have their animal presence aware in their mind, and they can have a conversation with their animal self, who has a very different perspective in most cases on what's appropriate and what should be done and how situations should be handled. And they're all really snarky. And so they've got this ongoing conversation with their animal side that, you know, is constantly telling them to do things that people really can't get away with doing. And hijinks ensue, but that is a lot of fun to write. Well, folks, we've blown through our time, so I want to go around real quickly and give everyone a chance to say where we can find you online. And if you have a new, recent, or upcoming book, let us know. Ari?
I can be found at arimckay.com and also on Facebook as Ari McKay. I am on there way, way, way too much, but I love being contacted by people. And all of our books are listed at arimckay.com, and I am not on the Instas or the Twitters or anything like that. But let's see. So our latest release was last October, was Gods and Monsters, which was the last of the first round of Carnival of Mysteries. And then we have the second round of Carnival of Mysteries coming up this year, which has got Morgan Brice, and we'll have Liv Rancourt joining us in that series. And also, we're hoping to get out another Asheville Arcana book this year. And there will also be coming out of an author conference that, once again, Liv Rancourt, I think you're going to that, right, Liv? We're going to New Orleans next month, and we're going to have a series called Hot Nights in the Big Easy, and it will be a paranormal series from, I think there's like 12 of us who will be publishing. So yes, please come find me on Facebook. Talk to me. I like talking to people.
Okay. Olivia?
You can find me on Facebook, Instagram. My website is olivia-hardin.com. And probably the exciting thing I have coming up is that Tawdra and I are launching a Kickstarter probably in the next month or two, which will be a flip book which has 2 of our paranormal romance duets. So you'll be able to read Tawdra's first and then flip the book over and read mine. So
Okay, Liv.
I am in most social media, either as Liv Rancourt or liv.rancourt or something like that. So that's Facebook, TikTok, Threads, no longer Twitter, but Threads, and Instagram. I don't use that much for my author self. That's sort of my garden pictures and my cute dog and whatnot. I loved Gods and Monsters, and I really think I need Tawdra's college professor vampire in my life. And upcoming releases will be I'm going to put The Richmond Vampire out, which was a novella that I wrote for it was a free anthology thing that now is no longer online, and so I got the rights back, and I have a brand new cover, and I'm incredibly excited about it. And then there's a sequel-ish that's to that will be part of another shared world thing that I'm not sure if we're supposed to talk about yet or not, but it's going to be really cool. The second book is called The Accidental Necromancer, which I'm really happy with how that worked out.
Cameron.
Okay, you can find me at my website is CameronAllie.com. There's all my books are listed there. You can also find me on Facebook. I've got a Facebook page, Cameron Allie. I've got a Facebook group called Cameron's Covey, I think. And I've got a Clay Ridge group that's special for people who have read the Clay Ridge series. It's called the Clay Ridge Coven. As far as the books go, I've got 2 out in the series right now. Well, 2 paperbacks in the series. I bundled the 2 smaller ebooks. The first one is called Love Spells, Full Moons, and Silver Bullets. So it has a really long name, but I generally just call it Love Spells. That's the one with my green-skinned witch and the mortal who comes from our world through a portal into her world. And then I've expanded that universe. The 2 shorter stories are about the sirens that you meet in the first book, and I'm working on Bloodlust and Black Magic. Yeah, Bloodlust and Black Magic, which will be the story where we find out more about these vampires that suddenly have acquired mage magic. So that hopefully will be out sometime this year, depending on how my kids going to school works out for me. So,
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
And Tawdra.
You can find me at tawdrakandle.com. My Tawdra books are on there. My Tamra books are on there, and I write erotic romance under Tessa Kent too. So those are all listed on there. As Olivia said, we have a Kickstarter coming out to the power. Is it the Power of 4? Yes. Okay.
yes, that's right. The Power of
Power
4.
of 4 is what it's called, because it's 2 duets. And I have at least 2 contemporaries releasing this year. The 25th book in my Small Town series is coming out in March, and that's called The Wanted One. And then in July, Olivia and I are part of a shared world called the 80s Mixtape, which is a lot of fun. Each book has an 80s song, and the shared world element is that it's everybody, at least one character in each book has attended their or is attending their class reunion, class of 1989. And so, and then these romances ensue from there. So that will be out in July. So those are my 2 releases this year. And you can, as I said, find me on my website. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I'm technically on TikTok, but not often. Those are Facebook and Instagram are generally where you can find me.
Okay. I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbrice.com. I'm on most of the social medias under one or both of those names. So if you spell them right, you'll find me. And the most recent Morgan Brice book is Signs and Wonders, which is number 7 in my Witchfang series. And the next one coming up is Last Resort, which is number 3 in the Treasure Trail series. So thank you all so much for being with us tonight and
Thank
being
you.
wonderful panelists. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more romance coming up on Continual, so we'll see you online.